Political leaders will never take risks if the people do not push them to take some risks. You must create the change that you want to see.
I believe that the only way to keep the values of the State of Israel as a Jewish democratic state is to enter the negotiations room and end the conflict with the Palestinians in accordance to the idea of two states for two peoples.
If we don't have a two-state solution, we don't have a Jewish state.
There is no option but a two-state solution. A state of Palestine to live in peace and security next to the state of Israel.
Everybody's so loyal and looking after us, but it's not looking after us. You have to support Israel to get out of the occupied territories.
American Jewish involvement in this is very, very important.
We need world Jewry telling us Israelis, please come to your senses.
We need you, the American Jews, to speak out and to speak very clear and support the idea of two-state solution.
The survival of Israel depends on achieving the two-state solution.
Real Zionism today is helping Israel to find a solution with our neighbors. Help the administration to help us in order to get the two-state solution.
A two-state solution that will bring an end to the conflict between us and the Palestinians and will create peace that will secure more than anything else the future and the security of the state of Israel.
For your children, do this. For your grandchildren, do this. For Israeli children and Palestinian children, and for Israel. Let them know that you stand behind negotiations that will lead to two states for two peoples living side by side in peace and security, and that you are part of the Great Constituency for peace.
Negotiations will be necessary, but there's a little secret about where they must lead. Two states for two peoples. Two states for two peoples.
Wow, this is great. I am so excited and gratified to be here this evening. I'm Jeremy Ben-Ami, the president of J Street. And tonight we have come together. We have over 500 people RSVP'd for tonight in our largest town hall to date. We have hundreds more people who are joining us tonight by live stream, watching all over the country. And as we get started, I do want to take a moment to say thank you and to congratulate all those who have been involved in organizing this great event that rises to the challenge that John Kerry so eloquently put forward, which is to create a great constituency for peace behind this administration's push to achieve a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I want to first of all thank our regional director, Kate Press, and the entire New York office. Many of you have worked with them. You know how wonderful they are. So a round of applause for Kate and the New York staff who made this evening possible. I also want to thank our panelists who will be joining us on stage during the course of the evening tonight. Admiral Ami Ayalon, one of the gatekeepers who is the former director of the Shin Bet. From the White House, Matt Nosenchuk, who is the official administration liaison to the Jewish community. And a special appearance that you may not be aware of, a very old friend of mine and somebody who I've had lots and lots of conversations about this topic with, who's become and has been for a long time a real leader on this issue. Congressman Jerry Nadler is here with us. I want to thank them for coming this evening to make the case for why a two-state solution is so fundamental to ensuring Israel's Jewish and democratic future, and why it is so worthy of our efforts during this campaign. Quickly want to also thank and acknowledge our co-chairs of the New York City J Street. I see Peter Fry here, and Talia Ben-Ami will be joining us soon. I know that Victor Kovner is somewhere here, the co-chair of our PAC, Victor Kovner. And Alex Stanton, who's the other co-chair, will be joining us in a little while. I see already so many friends and family, people who have become like family to me over the years, and I thank you for all of the tremendous work that goes on here in New York City. I want to also acknowledge that we are joined by a number of elected officials as well as the representatives of elected officials. Is Councilman Brad Lander here? I know that he was intending to join us and he will be here. 5 minutes away, all right. So I've known Brad for about 20 years. He is an incredible supporter of this cause. He's a deep believer in what we are doing, and I'm very, very grateful that he's made the time in his schedule. I know that representing Mayor de Blasio, that Avi Fink is here as well. I know there are representatives of Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer as well. And since this is my lot in life, I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. So for that, I apologize in advance, and I thank you all for coming. So let us start this evening by getting you up on your feet. This event, after all, is about more, and this whole campaign has to be about more than listening to us talk. So we're going to pretend we're at the Oscars, and we're going to do a big, giant photo. So I'm going to ask you to start by standing and waving your signs if you remember where you were in September 1993, when Yitzhak Rabin said on the South Lawn of the White House in signing the Oslo Accords that we have had enough of blood and tears. So if you were there, please stand up, or if you remember that moment. Now, those of you who are still sitting, do you remember the hope that we all had about 10 years later, a little less than 10 years later, when Bill Clinton was leading the effort at Camp David to try to get, it was Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat to conclude the work that Rabin had started. If you remember how you felt at that time, the hope that you felt, and if you want to see that work completed, stand up and wave your signs and make some noise. Are you still... Now, some of you are still sitting, very few, but those of you who are still sitting are probably a little younger. So I'm going to ask you, do you remember where you were when J Street first crossed your radar? Do you remember? Did you say to yourself that the time has come to redefine what it means to be pro-Israel? Did you say to yourself, the time has come to fix the broken politics that surround what it stands to be pro-Israel in American politics these days, that too often get in the way of American leadership to help Israelis and Palestinians get to an agreement? Then join us, stand up, wave your signs, make some noise. We are getting some pictures of this moment. Let the people online know you are here and excited and ready to work on this campaign. All right. Now, it only got 1 million retweets, I think, and it crashed Twitter, so I'm hoping you're all going to retweet this photo as soon as we post it, and we'll begin to try to crash Twitter for the second time. So thank you very, very much. I am really excited to be here with you this evening as we continue to build this important movement in this campaign. Through the two campaign, we are building the base of support that Secretary Kerry and President Obama need to bring about the vision that Yitzhak Rabin, Bill Clinton, and so many others have laid out for us. And for the first time across those decades and all of the various peace efforts that have come before, we have built together an organized and powerful constituency that is ready to back our leaders in taking the courageous steps that are needed in order to end this conflict peacefully. So much has changed in just the past generation. 30 years ago, it was inconceivable, almost unimaginable, to talk about a two-state solution. But today, a solid majority of Jews and Palestinians support a negotiated two-state solution. And today, we even have the most right-of-center prime minister that we have ever seen in Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, who is making the case publicly that if Israel is to remain both democratic and Jewish and the home of the Jewish people, then there must be a Palestinian state alongside it. And here in the United States, now 80% of Jewish Americans support a two-state solution. Now we know That's all right, you can clap for that. Of course, we know it isn't going to be easy to get to our goal. We know how many opportunities for compromise and for peace have been missed in the past. We know how leaders on one side or the other have failed to rise to the moment. But now, as we reach another of these critical moments, perhaps the most important one in the century-long history of this conflict, we know that this time must be different. And we as Americans, particularly as Americans with a deep affection for Israel, we have an enormous role to play. Because only with outside help and with a friendly but a firm push will the two leaders, Bibi Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas, choose the path of peace and compromise. And we are so fortunate to have a Secretary of State in John Kerry and a President in Barack Obama who couldn't be more deeply committed to reaching an end to this conflict and who recognize the American interest in bringing this conflict to an end. In the coming weeks, they are going to take a critical step toward that goal, as the Secretary is going to put forward a framework for ending the conflict, creating a moment of decision and pressing the leaders to make the tough choices. We come together tonight to say to the Secretary of State, to say to the President, to say to the Congress that there is a great constituency for peace in this country that supports the United States in bringing to bear its full power to end this conflict and realize a two-state solution. We come together to say loudly and clearly the two-state solution is the only solution. It isn't an option. It's a necessity for Israel's survival as the democratic home of the Jewish people. It's a necessity to provide the Palestinian people with the freedom and the self-determination to which they are entitled. And it is a necessity to ensure that future generations of Jewish and Palestinian children can grow up in peace and security. Let's be honest, we know that the voices of opposition will be loud. We will hear from the Naftali Bennett's and the settlers and their supporters that there must be no compromise. We will hear that there is no partner on the other side. We will hear the litany of the failures of the past. We will hear opponents in the Jewish community and on Capitol Hill saying the U.S. should just back off and stop pushing so hard. And when that pushback comes, we must be and we will be ready. Through the two campaign, J Street and you will demonstrate the deep support that exists in the United States for ending this conflict peacefully and diplomatically. We've already gathered thousands, tens of thousands of signatures on a petition expressing support for Secretary Kerry's efforts, and we're going to gather tens of thousands more. We've gathered by the thousands in town halls across the country, including nearly 500 here tonight in our largest town hall to date. And in the coming months, we will continue to speak out, we will continue to lobby, we will continue to run ads, and in order to win, in order to do this successfully, we need your help, we need the help of the people who are watching this at home. And to tell you now exactly what you can do tonight and in the coming days to advance the cause of a two-state solution and the work of the two campaign, let me turn the microphone over to my good friend, but not a member of my family, Talia Ben-Ami, the co-chair of J Street, New York City.
Thank you, Jeremy, and it is so great to see so many of you here tonight. Good evening and welcome. My name is Talia Ben-Ami, as Jeremy said, not related, and I am the co-chair of J Street NYC. I came to J Street because my ties to Israel run deep. 3 of my 4 grandparents lived in Israel as children, before Israel was even a state. 2 of them were in the Haganah, the pre-state armed forces that helped ensure the safety of the Jews living there. Their families were among the many Jewish families at the time who came to Israel from the US, Europe, and elsewhere to try and rebuild a home in the land our people had yearned to return to for 2,000 years. My grandparents helped bring the modern state of Israel into being. My grandparents started the job many years ago, and today I continue with it. The job of ensuring that we, as a Jewish people, have a place to call our own. In the past, the greatest threats came in the form of armies attacking and enemy violence. Today, the greatest threat to the state of Israel comes in the form of a lack of a two-state solution. Then, supporting Israel meant standing with it against the world, a black and white scenario. Now, we allow for shades of gray, and we know that the best way to support Israel, the best way to be Israel's friend, is to help it find its way to a peaceful resolution to its decades-long conflict. And a majority of American Jews know this. We have shown that we, as a group, support a two-state solution. We know that painful compromises will need to be made, but we know that the alternative, no two-state solution, will be worse. J Street is leading the charge to a two-state solution, and I couldn't be more excited or proud to help play a part in that effort. Back in June, when John Kerry called on the American Jewish community to form the Great Constituency for Peace, J Street knew that it had to answer his call. As part of the TO campaign, launched this past fall at our largest ever national conference, we have gathered tens of thousands of signatures and brought thousands of people together around the country at town halls just like this one tonight. We have taken action online, talked to our members of Congress, posted on Facebook and Twitter, all in support of John Kerry's ongoing negotiations, which offer the greatest chance for peace that we have seen in quite some time. And we need the thousands attending these town halls to mobilize their friends and families so that we have tens of thousands of people engaged in this campaign. It is your turn to join our call. Join us on J Street and make your voice heard. Join us on J Street and join the thousands of others who have stood up for peace. Join us on J Street and help build a better future for the state of Israel. Now, in the envelopes on each of your seats, you should have all had envelopes in your seats when you came in, you'll find a campaign postcard that looks like this, and a pencil. I want everyone to take a minute right now and sign the petition on these postcards. Tell Secretary Kerry that you firmly support bold American leadership toward a two-state solution. You'll see that we've also included 2 extra postcards for you to give your friends. Challenge yourselves to have a conversation with somebody about the two-state solution. Tell them about tonight and ask them to sign this postcard and join you and us in our support for 2 states. You'll also see when you leave this auditorium in the hallway that on the wall outside, there are also 2 large postcards for New York and New Jersey senators, which you can sign as well to urge them to sign on to a resolution supporting 2 states. For those of you watching at home on the live stream, you can visit our website, 2campaign.org, and join the campaign there. We need more signatures, more tweets, more emails, making it crystal clear that our community backs peace. Now, reach into those envelopes again. You'll find a letter that you can sign to your member of Congress. It is so important that we communicate our position to our elected leaders in Washington to ensure that America continues to play the leadership role we have seen it play in recent months. This letter is asking members of Congress to sign onto House Resolution 365, which backs the efforts of the administration toward an agreement. If you know who your member of Congress is, great. If not, you can just write your address, and that's your full address, not just your zip code. This is New York. We have more addresses than zip codes. And we can take it from there. On your way out of this auditorium tonight, you'll find receptacles to drop both the letters and the postcards into. All you have to do is sign, and we can take it from there and send them to Congress for you. Your voice will be heard. I'm very pleased to tell you that many members of the House in the New York metro area have already signed on to Resolution 365, including Representatives Hakeem Jeffries, Nita Lowey, Charlie Rangel, Timothy Bishop, Sean Patrick Maloney, Donald Payne Jr., and Jim Himes. If one of those members represents you, call them tomorrow and thank them for their support. But in New York, there is one member of Congress who really deserves our thanks and recognition for stepping out as a real leader on this issue. Our own Congressman Jerry Nadler, yes, Our own Congressman Jerry Nadler, along with Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky and Congressman Henry Waxman, was one of the original co-sponsors and authors of this resolution. As the Congressman has told us before, he was one of the few who understood the need for and the parameters of a two-state solution to this conflict, even before anyone had heard of it 2 decades ago. Tonight, I couldn't be more pleased that Congressman Nadler is here with us to offer a few words on the importance of this work and to participate in this town hall discussion. Please welcome to the stage Congressman Jerry Nadler.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Jeremy Ben-Ami and Victor Kovner and all of you for having me here today. This is a great gathering and a very good discussion. As we know, the only way to keep the state of Israel both Jewish and democratic is to have a peaceful resolution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, one that ends with 2 states for 2 peoples. We know that with the demographic realities on the ground, the status quo is not sustainable in the long term. The time to act is now, before it's too late. What will we do otherwise when the Palestinian leadership stops demanding a separate state and instead, as some are beginning to advocate for already, as simply to be permitted to vote? How do we oppose a demand for one person, one vote? We unfortunately hear an increasing number of voices supporting a one-state solution. Voices from the right who think Israel can permanently rule the Palestinian people, even if they become a majority between the Mediterranean and the Jordan, and voices from the left who seek a, quote, democratic state of all the peoples between the Mediterranean and the Jordan, unquote. Each of these are part of a formula for extinguishing Jewish independence, destroying the Zionist dream that goes back millennia, and turning Israel into yet one more country where Jews are a minority. There are no acceptable destinations on that road. I commend President Obama and Secretary Kerry for undertaking the task of using U.S. leadership to rally support to help peace negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Unfortunately, a successful outcome to these negotiations, while crucial, is far from assured. It is essential that the U.S. government use all of its power to try to bring the parties to a successful agreement that will lead to 2 states for 2 peoples. The American Jewish community must stand with them, not just quietly, but loudly, proudly, and in a public way. As progressive supporters of Israel, we must continue to do all that we can to support a peaceful 2-state solution. We understand that all people have the right to self-determination, Palestinians and Israelis. In the defense of self-determination, lip service and empty gestures are not enough. We all remain committed to Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic homeland for our people. We will continue to fight for a secure state of Israel, living side by side with a peaceful Palestinian state. A resolution to this painful conflict is our best chance at securing the Zionist dream, going back thousands of years, for a safe and secure homeland for the Jewish people, one that will be around far into the future, and one that will continue to provide a promise of protection for the survival of the Jews. And while some of us may disagree with Israeli policies at times, we should not let critiques of Israeli policies or of any Israeli government drown out what should be our most important message right now, that a 2-state solution is our only hope for ensuring a safe, peaceful future for generations of Jews and Palestinians to come. As supporters of Israel, we must continue to carry the torch and ensure that the dream of our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and countless previous generations lives on for centuries to come. It is from that place, as members of the pro-Israel community, that we must do all that we can to bring about a peaceful and a just 2-state solution. It's great to see all of you here rallying behind President Obama and especially around Secretary of State John Kerry's important efforts to help facilitate peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We must continue to build a constituency for peace. For that, I thank J Street and all of you. Thank you for all the work that you do.
Hello, I'm Catherine Muller. I'm studying at Cornell University, and I am a part of the J Street U student movement. When I was 14, I was in a class on the current state of Israeli affairs. At the end, the instructor made a T-chart on a large sheet of paper. On one side, it said Israel, and the other said Palestine. Right then and there, he asked us where we stood. As each of my fellow students stood up to write their names under Israel, that's when I realized he had left something out. I grew up in a very strong Jewish community here in New York City. My friends and I were all in the same B'nai Mitzvah class and spent Friday night after services at each other's houses, watching movies and playing Guitar Hero. But what really made this such a strong Jewish community was that the values we were taught in Hebrew school made their ways into our lives. We volunteered in soup kitchens and organized food drives. We visited the elderly and attended Shiva Minyans. We learned to act on our values of justice and peace and showed compassion, love, and kindness to each other and to others. Staring at this divided sheet of paper, I wrote my name on the line itself. The instructor selected names of people to explain why they supported Israel, but he never called on me. I felt like I had done something wrong. But wasn't it possible with my pro-Israel values to also be committed to Palestinians? Why was it that in a community where I was taught to love my neighbor, I was also being asked to oppose the Palestinians? Were not the futures of these two people so intertwined? In my freshman year at Cornell University, I heard about J Street U. After reading the mission statement, I knew I had finally found the kindness in this conflict that I thought did not exist. I found a practical strategy for moving forward to achieve the two-state solution, and I also found that the questions I had been asking were being asked by others. That's what makes J Street U so powerful. We're asking questions and taking action. Each and every one of us, no matter where we come from, are asking those same questions that I had, and many, many more. There are over 50 J Street U chapters at campuses across America, representing thousands of student voices. We are becoming the most powerful pro-Israel, pro-peace student movement. And with thousands of voices asking questions to the people who need to answer them, we become very, very loud. The other day I was talking with my dad, and he said, Jewish values teach you to think, but they don't teach you what to think. At J Street U, we're expected to ask, to engage, and to learn. And from that, we are then able to move our cause forward through informed actions, because there is more than one way to think about this issue. It is possible, through supporting the two-state solution, to be pro-Israel, pro-peace, and pro-Palestinian. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you all someone else who is working towards the two-state solution, Matt Nosenchuk, the Associate Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs. Mr. Nosenchuk joined the Obama administration in 2009 as Senior Counselor to Assistant Attorney General Tom Perez and played a key role on the Department's Defense of Marriage Act litigation team. Mr. Nosenchuk earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in History with honors and a law degree from Stanford University, was a Truman Scholar, and studied in Israel. Last year, Mr. Nosenchuk received the American Bar Association's inaugural Stonewall Award in recognition for his contributions to advancing LGBT civil rights, and the Attorney General's Distinguished Service Award. Please join me in welcoming Matt Nosenchuk.
Thank you, Catherine, for that introduction. It's great to be here. What a fantastic audience this is. It's great to be among friends here. So I've known Jeremy Ben-Ami for decades, and I remember having lunch with him a long time ago when J Street was just the kernel of an idea in his mind. And look at what it has become today. It's become a vehicle for activating thousands of pro-Israel, pro-peace American Jews. And it's truly a great honor to speak to all of you here tonight and to the many supporters who are watching this online via live stream. Thank you to Jeremy. Thank you to Kate Press and Peter Fry for your hospitality here in New York. Thank you, Congressman Nadler, for being here tonight and for your strong words in support of the administration's efforts. So this is my second J Street Town Hall. The first that I attended was in San Francisco about 2 weeks ago. Well, a lot has happened since then. We had Prime Minister of Israel come to Washington for a very good and constructive meeting at the White House, in the middle of a snowstorm, incidentally. That meeting was followed that evening by speech at AIPAC by Secretary John Kerry, and the following morning by Prime Minister Netanyahu, both of whom emphasized the many benefits of a two-state solution that affords Israelis the peace and security that they deserve and ensures Israel's identity as a democratic and Jewish state, and it also affords the Palestinians the state and dignity that they deserve. J Street's 2 campaign is lending a strong and passionate voice to what this administration is trying to accomplish. And I want to reiterate this last part. This is about Israelis and Palestinians sitting down and working out the big issues: borders, security, Jerusalem, refugees, mutual recognition, and an end of conflict and claims. The issues are not new, and while the negotiations are being conducted in secret, we all know what the issues are on the table and what difficult choices need to be made to resolve them. As President Obama said before the bilateral meeting last week with the Prime Minister, it's my belief that ultimately it still is possible to create 2 states, a Jewish state of Israel and a state of Palestine in which people are living side by side in peace and security. But it's difficult and it requires compromise on all sides. The time frame that we have set up for completing these negotiations is coming near, and some tough decisions are going to have to be made. We are not seeking an interim deal that would somehow substitute for a final agreement through the announcement of a potential framework within the next few weeks. We're not seeking confidence-building measures through a framework. We believe that if a framework for negotiations can be achieved, it will be a significant breakthrough, and it will be the first time that the parties have ever gotten to this point on the core final status issues. The prospects for an agreement, as you heard last week in the speeches and the remarks, are real, and Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas have shown courageous leadership already to get us to this point, and they've taken political risks to enter into the direct final status negotiations. And the United States, with the full backing of the international community, is doing all that it can to create the right atmosphere for the successful negotiations. I want to share what Secretary Kerry said last week at AIPAC that is the sort of fullest statement of what's on the table and where we're headed. So I think, this is Secretary Kerry, I think everybody shares the view that this is really no mystery and what the end game really looks like. After Camp David and Oslo and Y and Annapolis and Taba and all of these efforts, what the end game should look like is straightforward. Security arrangements that leave Israelis more secure, not less. Mutual recognition of the nation state of the Jewish people and the nation state of the Palestinian people. An end to the conflict and to all claims. A just and agreed solution for Palestinian refugees, one that does not diminish the Jewish character of the state of Israel, and a resolution that finally allows Jerusalem to live up to its name as the city of peace. You can applaud. The third person to say that recently. So we're counting on your voice and on your support as these negotiations advance. The time for action is now, and you represent the influential voices who can paint a vision of what peace can bring and how people's lives in Israel and in the territories will be better with peace, what it will mean for security, education, and travel, as well as economic growth, hope, and opportunity. We need you to be strong and persistent voices in your communities, in your synagogues, in your families, that in support of the negotiations and in support of a two-state solution. If we in the administration can be of assistance in that regard, in your efforts, please don't hesitate to ask and get in touch. These town halls are a beginning and hopefully will be followed by many more meetings, large and small alike, by op-eds that you and others write, by letters to the editor, by sermons that your rabbis deliver, and other actions that you can take to mobilize in support of a two-state solution. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be with you tonight, and I look forward to working closely with J Street in the future. Thank you very much.
Good evening, friends. My name is Ephraim Pelkovitz. I'm a rabbi of a conservative synagogue in Midtown East, or Olam, and I'm also a member of J Street's Rabbinic Cabinet. My son, Alexander, who turns 5 in just a few hours, likes to tell me, Abba, you have 2 jobs. Your first job is to be an Abba, and your other job is as a rabbi. And it's amazing how in those 2 or 3 short sentences, Alexander is able to articulate far better, certainly more succinctly than I could for myself, what the most important priorities in my life are to me. Take care of my children. Make sure they're learning, know they're being loved, know they're being cared for, that they'll have a better future to look forward to, and also to look out for, to care for my community, to watch out for the well-being of the members of my synagogue, to think about the future of American Jewry, and finally to think even more broadly about the needs of Klal Yisrael, of the world Jewish community and the community of our people in Israel. And I feel blessed to hold these 2 jobs of rabbi and Abba at such a fortunate moment in human history, when we have both a safe and secure and free home in the United States of America, and sovereignty and freedom and opportunity as well in our historic homeland. As a rabbi, as a father, I want, and in fact I need to ensure that this moment in our history that I have been blessed to live in is not simply a fluke, that a Jewish and democratic state in our home will be there for many, many generations to come. That Alexander, that my 2-year-old Lev will one day be able to travel to Israel with their children to a democratic homeland. That my congregants, that the American Jewish community more broadly, will continue to feel as immensely proud and as deeply connected to Israel as I do. And that's why I believe it's essential that I dedicate my energy, and that everyone here dedicates their strength to ensuring that the democratic homeland of our Jewish people is able to remain both Jewish and democratic by doing all that we can do to achieve a 2-state solution. Because I firmly believe that Israel's Jewish and democratic character hangs upon that 2-state solution, one which will result in a Palestinian state living alongside Israel in peace and in security. And this ideal is something that our next speaker, that Admiral Ami Ayalon, has given his tremendous energies to as well. It's a great privilege to have Admiral Ami Ayalon here with us tonight at J Street's New York Town Hall. And as J Street's rabbinic leader chosen to represent tonight, it is my great honor to introduce him to all of you here. Admiral Ami Ayalon is a former head of the Shin Bet and the former commander of Israel's Navy. He has served as a member of Knesset as well as a cabinet minister. In 2002, Ayalon headed the People's Voice Peace Initiative, and he is one of the founders of the Blue and White Future, a nonpartisan political movement committed to securing the future of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state by facilitating inclusive discourse which promotes a 2-state solution. Ami Ayalon holds a BA in economics and political science from Bar Ilan. He's a graduate of the U.S. Navy War College in beautiful Newport, Rhode Island, where I did my Navy chaplaincy training. He holds an MA in public administration from Harvard, as well as an MA in law from Bar Ilan University. I'd like everyone to join me in giving a very warm welcome to our stage to Admiral Ami Ayalon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. New York is very cold and very far from my home. So I asked myself, what am I doing here? But I wanted to come. I wanted to come because I feel a sense of urgency. And I wanted to come because I understand for many years that the status quo endanger the state of Israel the way our parents gave it to us as a Jewish democratic state. And this is why, in a way, why I'm here. But let me start with something very different. And I want to tell something about the way I understand what we used to say in Hebrew, Bnei Israel arevim ze leze, which means the people of Israel are responsible for each other. What is the meaning of this very, very, very unique and profound idea? When we created the state of Israel, we understood from the very beginning that we are creating a safe and a democratic home for the Jewish people. But it is a very unique phenomenon. Israel is the only state on earth that gives rights to people who are not its citizens. Jews everywhere, all over the world. Some of the rights are beyond the rights that the citizens of Israel are getting if there are non-Jews. So I ask myself whether with this right there are some responsibilities, duties. And I think yes. The responsibilities that I see and I expect from you is to tell me what you think. This is your duty. It is not your right. This is your duty because we are writing the story of our life every day, and whether you like it or not, this is a story of your life as well. A woman asked me yesterday, do I have the right to tell you what to do? I said yes. So she asked, but what will happen if I will tell you and something very bad will happen? So I asked her, imagine what will happen if you will not tell us and something very bad will happen. This is your responsibility. You cannot choose whether you want to do it or not. This is the whole idea of Bnei Israel arevim ze leze. And in addition, it is obvious the world of today is becoming more and more complicated. In order to understand, we have to see every event from more than one angle. Sometimes, and this is the case, when from a different planet, from America, you see it clearer. We are too close. Sometimes we feel the pain, sometimes we hate, sometimes we are too emotional. We need your perspective because otherwise we do not understand. You understand, we understand the area. We understand the region. But you understand the global community. You understand the world. And in order to survive, in order to succeed, and in order to win, we need your perspective. And let me say something about security. In Gatekeepers, I'm quoted as saying that we found ourselves in a situation in which we win every battle, every military battle, but we are losing the war. So what is the essence of this kind of feeling? 1 year before I retired as the Commander-in-Chief of the Israeli Navy, Prime Minister Rabin called me to his office. And we were sitting, the two of us, and he told me, finally, after 3 years of discussions, you have your submarines. And this is a time for you to retire and to accept the position of the director of the Israeli Shin Bet. So I told him no. It was not very easy to refuse to the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister. He asked me why. So I told him, Mr. Prime Minister, I want to be very honest with you. During the last 30 years, I'm a sailor. I'm a naval officer. And what we do is in ethical problems is very simple. We sail, we know who are the bad guys, who are the good guys. In a way, we have to fight the bad guys and to defend the good guys. In the Shin Bet, all the colors are gray. We shall never know who is a good guy or who is a bad guy. I hate the idea that I will be walking the street and I will have to think whether these people might be my enemies. These are the people whom I live with. So I refused. Until today, by the way, I ask myself every day what would have happened if I wouldn't. I have no answer. 1 year later, when he was assassinated by Yigal Amir, the reality in which I understand the Israeli society and the way I understand threat, violence, and security has been changed. So 12 months later, when I retired, and Shimon Peres, who replaced him, called me in the middle of the night and asked me the same request, I couldn't refuse. So I did it for 4.5 years. And during 4.5 years, we fought terror. We did it by ourselves, but we did it with our Palestinian friends. First 10 days, when I was in my new position, it was the most violent wave of violence that we ever faced since the creation of the State of Israel. We lost 57 people in our streets and 217 wounded in less than 2 weeks. And later we reduced the level of violence and of terror until the level in which, during the 12 months before the Intifada, only one Israeli citizen died as a result of terror. Now, how did we do it? If I learned something during these 4 years, it is a very, very simple concept. If we want security, Palestinians should have hope. This is the equation. We shall not have security unless Palestinians will have hope. Because you cannot stop the violence that comes from a society that feel that they have nothing to lose. The whole concept of security, the whole concept of deterrence, the whole concept of victory is based on the idea that you are fighting against somebody who has something to lose. He has hope. And until we shall reach this day, we shall not feel safety, and we shall not have security the way we dream. Now, it was Prime Minister Begin who introduced us the concept that our security is not based only on our military power when he brought us back from Sinai and he signed the peace accord, the peace agreement with Egypt. It was followed by Prime Minister Rabin, who signed the peace with Jordan and started the process with the Palestinians. I'm saying it because from this day we understand that our security concept is based not only on military power. Military power is a necessary condition. It is not sufficient. In order to have security, we need political agreements. We have to be accepted as a legitimate player in the Middle East. Unless we achieve it, we shall not see any security for the future that we are trying to look. Now, I support Kerry initiative and I support the President because I understand that it is our interest. It is not a Palestinian interest, it is not an American interest. It is first of all our interest to see a statement of principles that are based on very simple principles which are clear to all the people who are living in the region. Israel will be declared as a state of the Jewish people. Palestine of the Palestinian people. Palestinian refugees will have to return into the state of Palestine, and Jews shall return into the state of Israel. And they will have to tell us that this is the end of the conflict and no more claims. I believe that if we shall see these principles, the majority of the Israelis will support it. I know it because I meet Israelis and because we see it in the polls during the last 10 years. Let me finish by saying that several years ago, an American president brought us a roadmap. Now, I used to navigate for many years. I can tell you that you cannot navigate on a map, no matter how good is this map, if there is a clear goal that you want to be there. Until now, we have a roadmap, but we do not have a clear goal. A statement of principles will be the clear goal, will complete the roadmap. And I believe that the president who will bring us this very clear future will complete the roadmap, and it will make it much easier for us to sail in this very, very rough storm. Now, after sailing many years at sea, I can tell you, sailors used to say that a captain who does not know where he wants to sail, there is no wind on earth that will bring him there. It is for us to know exactly where we are heading. And I believe that a set of principles will make it very clear. Thank you very much.
So now we've reached the point in our town hall where we're going to engage all of you and those at home. And let me tell you exactly how we're going to do this. On your seats, besides the envelope that had all the goodies that Talia told you about and that you've already signed and taken part in, there should be a couple of index cards on which you can write questions for any of the panelists. When you have filled out the index card, just hold it up, and we have volunteers who will be roaming the aisles and ready to grab them and bring them up front here, and we will ask as many of them as possible. So I already see the first couple of hands up, and I'm hoping we'll soon see people collecting them. Terrific. Now, for those of you at home, there are two ways to share questions with us. One is simply email us at 2campaign@jstreet.org. It's the number 2campaign@jstreet.org, or tweet your questions using the hashtag 2campaign. And we've got folks who are monitoring both our email and our Twitter feed, and we will get questions from the people who are watching at home. We'll get questions from here. They'll be fed up to me, and we will have as interactive a discussion with our wonderful panel as possible. There are microphones that have little on and off switches at the bottom. So hopefully everybody can just test and see if their mics are on. And we will get started. I have a question to start out the conversation, and then I'll start to get the ones from the audience. And I'll start with you, Ami, and perhaps others on the panel want to comment. You've mentioned the core issues. For many years, they've been well-known: borders and security and settlements and all the rest of the more policy issues. The issue that's really taken front and center in the last few months, at least, and certainly in the last couple of years, is this issue of recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. And for some people, it is regarded as a precondition. It's regarded now as sort of the sine qua non, without which there will not be an agreement. And I'd love to get your perspective. You mentioned it a little bit in your opening remarks, and perhaps you could share with us your take on the importance of that phrase, the Jewish state, and the recognition of it as part of, or perhaps preceding, moving towards a framework agreement. And then we can get thoughts from others on the panel as well.
Well, as I said before, for me is very important. And I remember when I met for the first time Sari Noseba, my Palestinian friend, and we initiated our initiative. This exactly, it was discussed, and he asked me the same question. And I told him, Sari, let me tell you first of all that I'm asking you why it is so difficult for you to accept this idea. I'm not sure I can give you a good reason why it is important, but it is important. Because this is my identity. And I said before that Israel is a very unique phenomenon. But let's be honest, we know that by signing a piece of paper, we do not finish our problems. Some of our debates within Israel will start in this moment. Now, we shall have to live with more than 20% of non-Jews. And I ask myself, what will be the Palestinian reaction if we shall have problems or even violence within Israel? I tell you what is our reaction when Jews suffer all over the world. I know exactly. We sent our troops to the middle of Africa in order to save Jews. We did not conquer Soviet Union, but it was clear to us that it is our duty to do everything, to use our diplomatic power or to talk to friends everywhere in order to secure them, to save them. Now, it should be very clear that Israeli citizens, Jews and non-Jews, should be treated as equal. But I want to make sure that from the very beginning, when we start this very, very difficult process, it will be very clear to our neighbors that this is for us to do it, and they have to accept the idea that Israel is a Jewish state.
Congressman, do you want to add anything to that particular issue?
Hello?
Yes.
If there is going to be a peace agreement that's going to last, it has to be based on everybody's agreeing to the basic narrative of the other side, that the Palestinians have a right to a state, that the Jews have a right to a state. If it's not based on that, it's difficult to see how it can last. You could make the case that if an agreement is made with a final end of claims, and that's very important. We have no further claims. The deal we got, we might have wanted more, but the deal we got is what we got, and that's it, and we have no further claims, no further complaints, and that includes a Jewish a state of Israel with a Jewish majority, with no right of return or very limited right of return of Palestinian refugees, so demographically that's not going to be upset. One could say that that's de facto recognition. But if it's de facto recognition, it would be a lot better if it's de jure recognition.
Thank you. This one for Matt. We've heard this question at a number of the town halls, which is, what makes this effort by John Kerry and by this administration different from prior ones? And what, from the administration's point of view, is more likely to make it succeed than the other efforts that haven't succeeded? What is the Secretary doing differently? What's different in the process? What factors has he brought into play that weren't there before?
Thanks for the question, Jeremy. Well, one factor that's different is certainly the presence of Secretary Kerry in these negotiations. You know, he's been now to the region more times than I can even keep track of. You know, he is, as I think Prime Minister Netanyahu described him, indefatigable and incredibly committed to this process. You know, he is all in conducting this process. You know, it's not only his commitment to it, but it's how he's conducting it, which is to support direct final status negotiations that are being conducted in secret, not in public, and not in the press. You know, I think it's Secretary Madeleine Albright who has said, you know, negotiations are like mushrooms, they grow best in the dark. So, you know, this is an approach that he has taken here. There have been, you know, remarkably little in the way of leaks from the negotiations. As I said earlier, we know what the issues are. So I think the fact that they are being conducted in this manner is different. The fact that we have now identified this framework, as the Admiral described, as a set of principles to guide us in navigating towards a destination. Well, this is not the first time that has been used. That was employed in Camp David. There was first a statement of framework that was announced, and then Camp David Accords came some months later. So that's an example where, you know, there was a successful resolution using an approach like this. And finally, as we know and has been discussed, the stakes are high on both sides, incredibly high now, and we feel as though this is a real moment, and that by achieving an agreement now, that opens up all kinds of opportunities, economic and otherwise, political, diplomatic, and otherwise. And if we let this moment pass, it's not clear when the next such time will occur, if it will occur, and there are, you know, other things that will flow, other responses that will occur internationally and otherwise that will make it even more difficult going forward to achieve an agreement.
Can I say something? Well, I hate to be the bad guys, or the bad guy, but the way I see it until now, it is not different from what we saw during the last 20 years. And this is why, in order to be different, this set of principles should be on the table, and it should be as clear as crystal. Because, let me tell you, until now, we did not have any clear set of principles. Clinton, when he spoke, he did not write anything. He spoke about it. If you will ask Saeb Erekat, he will tell you one version. If you will ask Ehud Barak, he will tell you a different version. And it was not clear. It was very, very ambiguous. We have to understand that the concept that was invented in America that brought to us the idea of constructive ambiguity is very destructive. In the Middle East, if it's not clear, if it is ambiguous, people believe that there is a conspiracy here, something behind it. So in order to be different, we have to see a very clear, not ambiguous, set of principles, and then it will enable us to go forward. Unless we see it, we are repeating the same mistakes that we have been doing during the last 20 years.
There are a number of questions in the batch that I already have, and I'm sure there are more over there, about Hamas. It's a constant issue that people want to hear. How is it possible to talk about this when you have Hamas in power in Gaza, and what can be done about it? And then there's another batch of questions that relates to the settlers, and how is it possible to envision peace when you have X 100,000 people living over the Green Line and a constantly expanding number. So you've got these two sets of problems, not to relate them, they're not at all equivalent, but just to put them on the table as two of the very difficult questions. So I throw them out to the panel, the group as a whole, and ask, what are your thoughts about how to deal with Hamas? And what are your thoughts on how do you deal with settlements? What is the answer to these two tough spoilers?
It's an American problem.
Right. Well, so the position of the administration on Hamas has not changed. Hamas is a designated foreign terrorist organization, and we've been clear to any potential Palestinian unity government that it must unambiguously commit to nonviolence, recognition of the State of Israel, and acceptance of previous obligations and between the parties. And President Abbas has reiterated his commitment to these principles. So that in essence is our position on Hamas. And I can't go too much more into it than that.
So any creative thinking on that, Congressman?
Well, the only thing you can say really is that if there were to be an agreement, if the Palestinian Authority and the Israelis and the Americans as guarantors or whatever agreed on an agreement which provided for an independent Palestinian state with whatever security guarantees for Israel, etc., it would change the political equation. It would change the political equation on the ground. Hamas presumably would not agree with it, but Hamas hopefully would be in a much weaker position. It's clear, or at least it has been clear for a long time, I think, that if there were a real agreement that was here in the now, not in the far imaginary future, for a Palestinian independent state, etc., most Palestinians would go with it. There'd be a minority that wouldn't. There'd be a minority on all sides that wouldn't agree. But that would change the political equation, and hopefully Hamas would no longer control the territory after a while. And obviously we'd have to oppose it. And how you deal with it would have to be part of the agreement, obviously.
What about on the settlements, in actually thinking through post an agreement? You and I have discussed this before about the view of the settlers not as an enemy, but actually as pioneers, as people who were sent there on a mission and need to be brought home. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about your view of how to treat the settlements and the settlers in an
I will start with the settlers and then I'll say something about Hamas. First of all, the settlers, I didn't say it before, but my parents were settlers. When they came to Israel during the 30s, the concept of Zionism was very simple: settlements and security. The concept was, we are going to build a future state in Israel for the Jewish people, and its future borders will be wherever we can build a settlement, walk the land, and defend ourselves. From my kibbutz, people from my class, I was too busy in the Navy, but they were to create settlements, and they were the pioneers, not me. Because this was a concept, it was not invented by Likud, it was not invented, by Gush Emunim, it was the Labour Party. And in '67, nothing happened. We thought that we are going to expand because in '48 we just stopped. It is not a border. Now we understand, personally I understood that during the first Intifada, that yes, we liberated places, but we conquered and we occupy people, and this is the reason why we have to bring back our pioneers. But they are our pioneers, and we have to treat them like this. Second, it will be very painful, and this is why I meet rabbis, not pragmatic rabbis, rabbis who supported disobedience during the time when we pulled out of Gaza. And they are totally against my views when it comes to two-state solution. But I asked them a very, very simple question. What is necessary for you in case of agreement between us and Palestinians that will be signed by our government? What is necessary for you in order to call your people not to be violent, to take your houses, your families, your Bible, and the people whom you buried here, and to come back to Israel or in your language to a different place in the land of Israel? So they told me, well, we are totally against it. Or I asked them again. So they said, it is a precondition that we shall have a national referendum. So I asked them why. Do you believe in democracy? They said, yes, but in our language. And this is not my dictionary, so I quote them. They said, look, we do not know exactly what gods want every moment. Kol hamon kekol Shaddai, which means if this is the voice of the Israeli people, probably this is what gods tell us to do. Some of them even told me, look, the land of Israel does not belong to us. It belongs to God. Sometimes he gives it to us, sometimes no. For 2,000 years, he did not. So probably this is what he wants. I'm saying it because I came to believe that if it will be the decision of the Israeli people as a result of national referendum, all the religious leaders, I'm not saying that some people will not use violence, but the religious leaders will support it. Because they understand that the people of Israel comes first and before the land of Israel. But this will be the first time when they will face this dilemma. And this is why it is so important. When it comes to Hamas, we have to understand Hamas phenomena. Palestinian society is the most secular Arab society. Hamas is more or less between 15 to 18% when it comes to Hamas ideology, when it comes to people who want to see their children in Hamas schools. Why did they vote Hamas? Because of two reasons. First of all, PLO and Hamas corruption, and Fatah corruption. The way they saw during the administration led by Arafat. Second, and this is why I agree to exactly what you said. Hamas was the organization that told them that diplomacy will not work. Hamas told them, look, these Israelis, with the Americans, they are lying to us. They will not give us any piece of land unless we shall use violence. Now, the problem is that until now, all what they saw is our reaction to their violence. If you will ask a Palestinian, he will tell you that we came to Madrid and then to Oslo because of the First Intifada. We left Lebanon because of Hezbollah and the terror, and we left Gaza because of the Second Intifada and Hamas. And this is why it is so important to do it not as a result of Palestinian violence. If we do it now as a result of diplomacy, then we are sending a message that we speak two languages. Yes, we know how to speak military language. But in addition, it will be the first time that they will see that we speak diplomacy as well.
So this question is a little bit for Talia, a little bit for Matt. In your experience of dealing with the American Jewish community, either locally organizing or as you're talking around the country, and you hear from people who oppose a two-state solution, what are their solutions? If you're hearing the arguments, can you help the audience to understand what are the alternative solutions that are being offered, if any, that you are hearing when people are opposed to what we're trying to do through the two campaign and the two-state solution?
Sure. Well, I think I hear a lot of different things from both sides of it. I definitely hear a lot of people saying that the status quo is sustainable and that we can just continue doing what we're doing right now in Israel. And as you heard from Admiral Ayalon, that's simply not the case. I hear people saying that we could have one state, one person, one vote, and to me, that spells the end of a Jewish homeland, and that is, not really a solution. So, Jeremy, to answer your question, I hear other options, but nothing that really provides a solution that allows for a Jewish and democratic state of Israel.
So here's, I guess, the good news from my standpoint, is I've traveled around and talked to groups. I don't hear a lot of opposition to a two-state solution. In fact, I think an overwhelming majority of the American Jewish community supports it. Now, clearly there are parts of the community that don't and won't. But I think those parts of the community have largely been quiet and, let the negotiations continue, maybe believing there's no chance that they're going to succeed anyway, so we can just sort of be quiet and let it fizzle out. But clearly, if this framework comes out and things seem to be moving, I think that clearly those voices will emerge. Now, I have heard discussions and advocacy for a one-state solution, but that's not been actually an American Jewish group. It's been speaking to a Palestinian American group. So, clearly there are, and that view is, of course, not shared throughout the Palestinian American community either. So I think there's a broad consensus of support for a two-state solution. I think that this campaign, the other efforts that have been undertaken in this country to talk about the benefits of a two-state solution, its necessity to preserving Israel as a nation state of the Jewish people and a democratic state, is going to be helpful in shaping the debate going forward. And we need to be sure that this voice and this position remains strongly held and strongly voiced, because the detractors will certainly come forward, and that's where all of you come in to stand up and advocate in support of a two-state solution and what you believe in and what we are trying to achieve today.
So we have a question here that follows up on that, Congressman Nadler, about the temperature in Congress and what is the sense today when it comes to these issues in Congress, and why is there not greater vocal support for what Kerry is trying to do coming out of the Congress today?
It's an interesting question. You start off with the fact that it's Kerry and Obama doing it. The Republicans will oppose anything they do, no matter how much they agree with it in their privacy of their hearts. Secondly, there's a tremendous distrust. If they're doing it, there must be something wrong. And they are naive. We know they're naive because they haven't agreed with us all the time. And they're naive, and they're going to put pressure on the Israeli government to make concessions that will be dangerous to Israeli security. That is, I think a lot of members of Congress are concerned about that. A lot of members of Congress just don't think very much about the subject. They're pro-Israel. It's a nice thing, and why you shouldn't pressure the Israeli government in any way. And I don't think that, yes, it would be nice to have a two-state solution, but they don't think and see the necessity of it. It would be nice, but without thinking about it, things are going along pretty well. They can continue going along. The status quo is sustainable. And I think that's a lot of it. And we don't want to be, there's still a sense that if you pressure Israel or if you're pro-Palestinian in any way, you're anti-Israel, or you could be seen that way. And I think that's a lot of it. I don't want to say that there are large numbers of members of Congress who think deeply about these issues. There aren't, to be blunt. Certainly, there are not a lot of members of Congress who've come to the conclusion that we must have a two-state solution, because God forbid we don't, what's going to happen 20 years from now? I don't think most people think that way.
Do you think that there's a role then for those, the few within the Congress that do? I mean, is there more that we can do to help you? Is there more that our movement can do to try to help to shape that perception of what it means to be pro-Israel?
Well, I think exactly what's being done. The two states, you know, when you look at it, the two-state solution's come a long way. In 1990, the American Jewish Congress, which was the most liberal Jewish organization, passed by a one-vote margin a resolution in favor of the establishment of a Palestinian state. And that was considered a heresy. It was a heresy, it was a terrible. Today it's received wisdom almost in most Jewish organizations that you have to get there whether you can, consonant with safety, and security is the major question. But that's desirable is not really terribly at issue anymore, except on some parts of the right.
So, Ami, somebody picked up on the statement that you made about Palestinians being given hope, and that there was greater peace and security during a period when Palestinians were given hope. And the question says, what exactly did Israel do then that brought about hope? And do you think that the Israeli government today could be doing more to provide a sense of hope to help to create a greater chance for success?
Well, at that time, first of all, there was a process that was perceived by both sides a viable process, which is not the case today. So, by the way, it was very interesting because I don't know if you know the name, Dr. Khalil Shkaki. He's a pollster, Palestinian pollster. By the way, he is a brother of the Shkaki who founded the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. But he's very pragmatic. He finished his PhD, I think, here in Columbia or somewhere here in New York. He teaches in Palestine, in Israel, in America. So we saw a very, very interesting correlation. He used to measure every month the level of support in the peace process during the 90s. And we saw a very interesting correlation. For me, it was when I was in my position in the Shin Bet, it was probably the best source of information, intelligence. Because the higher was the support of the Palestinians in the peace process, the higher was the support of the Palestinian organizations in fighting terror. I used to meet Jibril Rajoub and Mohammed Ahlan every month in order to cooperate, to fight Hamas together. At that time, they had more Hamas activists in jail than we had in our jail. But they used to tell me every meeting, look, we are fighting our brothers in order to create security, but we are not your agents. You are not paying our salary. They used to tell me, we are not South Lebanese. Don't forget it. The moment that our people will not believe that we are doing it in order to create a better future, in order to see the end of occupation and the end of humiliation, forget about us. Because we will not perceived as collaborators in the eyes of our people. So this is exactly what I'm saying. We saw that the higher was the hope among Palestinians, the more effective was the way they fought together with us. And this was why we had such a high level of security. Can we do something today? Today it is much more difficult, but I believe that we can. And the question is for us, Israelis, I believe that if and when we shall see a clear statement of principles, I don't know if it will enable going on negotiating, but it will help Israelis to understand that, first of all, the future is clearer. Settlers will understand that they are not living there forever. Today, during the last 20 years, we were sending a double message to our people, to the international community, and to the Palestinians. Now, in addition, if we can do, yes, we can do. For example, but this is for us, our Prime Minister should say tomorrow or the day after principles will be published. Since we understand that the future border will be along 67 with territorial exchange, I say to everybody now, yes, we want to go on negotiating, but from now on, we are not going to build any building on the eastern side of the security fence. Second, because we sent our pioneers, they deserve from us that all of them who understand today and wish to return, according to our polls, by the way, the polls that we are running, 30% of them, which means almost 30,000 settlers who are living today on the eastern side of the fence, are ready to come back tomorrow if they will be compensated, and they deserve it, and if they will get legitimacy. They do not want to be perceived as traitors or deserters, and they deserve it. If we shall do it for the first time during the last, not 20 years, 40 years, we are sending a clear message, not a double message, to our people. It will not be under Israeli sovereignty. When we shall negotiate, it will be between the Green Line and the security fence with territorial exchange. We are sending a message to the Palestinians. For the first time, they will see Israelis moving back to Israel not as a result of violence. And for the first time, we are sending a message to the international community that we are honest, because we are not sending double message. We are not saying that we want two states and building settlements on the same time.
So I think we have time for one more round of questions and then a couple of closing words, and we'll be done. Two issues, and anybody should feel free to jump in, but probably this falls to Ami. The first one is, do you see any way in which some settlers can remain within a state of Palestine if there is an agreement? As the Prime Minister has said that not everyone would have to leave. And second, what are the options in play for the refugees, the Palestinian refugees? What are the actual tangible options for providing them with relief and an end of their claims under a potential solution? So refugees, and can settlers remain? I don't know if the rest of you want to address those questions or if I should leave it for Ami, but please jump in.
Please.
Well, for me, the concept of Zionism is statehood. Jews used to live in this, in the land of Israel during the last 3,000-4,000 years. But Zionism is statehood. So you ask me, what do I think about them staying there? For me, it's strange. But it is not me. And on one hand, I say if they wish. On the other hand, I insist that it depends on the Palestinians. So if you ask me, what I would like to see is an agreement that says they will come back unless they wish to stay, and if they wish to stay, it will be negotiated with the Palestinians, and only if Palestinians will agree to it. And I'm saying it because I'm saying the same when I deal with Palestinian refugees. So since I know that the way I see it, the whole concept of Palestinian state is for them to return into the Palestinian state, I want my settlers, we send them. I want them to come back. But there is another issue, and I believe that it will be raised when it will be negotiated. Look, we are living in the Middle East, not in America. If they stay, I know what will be our reaction if they will suffer there. And I think that if they will stay, in a way we are giving a permission to every settler to bring us back to the territories. This is something that we have to bear in mind. And this is why it should be discussed with the Palestinians, because if we decide that they will stay, it will be the responsibility of the Palestinians and of ours. So again, it should be discussed.
So it's been an incredible discussion. I want to wrap things up by saying to, Congressman.
Yeah, I agree with that, but with a slight difference. The concept of two states for two peoples is just what it says. But equally, there's no reason why Jews should not live in any country they want to, including the Palestinian state, provided that they understand that if they live in a Palestinian state, the Palestinian state is sovereign, they are subject to its laws. Presumably there'd be an agreement that minority rights must be protected, but they cannot expect the aid of the Israeli Defense Forces should those rights not be protected. So that How many people would wish to live in a Palestinian state with such non-guarantees? I don't know. But if there are any, I don't see why they shouldn't be permitted, subject to negotiations with the Palestinians. As I said, I don't think there'd be many, but as a theoretical matter, I don't see why it shouldn't be permitted. Again, the dominant thing, though, is that the Palestinian state has to be for the Palestinians who live there and for the Palestinian refugees, or more reasonably, the descendants of the Palestinian refugees who return. And let me just add one other thing. Obviously, part of this agreement is going to be some sort of compensation for Palestinian refugees, or really for the descendants of Palestinian refugees. The estimate is there are only 50,000 refugees left, and some of them want to stay where they are, and some of them want to go back to the new Palestinian state. There also will have to be some sort of agreement for compensation for the 850,000 Jewish refugees who were kicked out of Arab countries and Iran from 1946 to 1960, and that is on the agenda, I'm told.
Well, there's a lot more that we could obviously discuss. We've talked tonight about what you can do to have the postcards to sign. You have letters to sign. There are large posters out in the hallway to our senators, both the senators from New York and New Jersey, to get them on board a resolution that supports the two-state solution and the Kerry Initiative. Please do drop the letters and the cards that you have signed into the receptacles on the way out. Please tell your friends to join the Two campaign. Please keep up with us on Facebook and Twitter and email and all the rest of the methods that are out there. Let me thank our wonderful panelists and all who participated tonight. Let me thank our wonderful volunteers and our staff who helped put this event together. It's been a great evening. It's a great campaign, and we look forward to working with you in the months to come. Thanks again for coming this evening.